Well, so morning everyone. We kick off now. Looks like we've got most of the people expecting to have joined. So welcome to the webinar. My name is Chris Watkins, and today we're going to cover sort of a bit of a review and highlights of what happened at the CPX event in Vienna. That was 2 weeks ago from now. So first things, a couple of bits around the webinar sort of setup. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, you should have a little bar. You can expand that bar and ask questions. So any time throughout the presentation, if you've got any questions, feel free to jump on and ask those. Also, just to point out that some of the information we're going to show you today is based on roadmap information. So from a Checkpoint perspective, that means early availability or beta for other vendors. So it could change, but you know we try to put in what we know about timeframes and that kind of thing. But obviously, as it is roadmap, there is a chance these things can change as we go along. So this is kick off. So in terms of what is CPX 360, for those of you who've not been before, it's Checkpoint's global conference for partners and customers. So it takes place in 3 locations around the world. The Vienna one was the largest event that CPX or Checkpoint have ever had globally, just over 4,000 people. Just to let you know, in terms of if you want to see any of the videos and content that were shown at the event, they were streamed on YouTube, and they're there as available as a recording. So if you go onto YouTube and search for #CPX360, you'll be able to see those videos online and view those. So that's got all the keynotes, key speakers, that kind of thing. So in terms of what were the key messages that we got from the event? So as you'd expect, it's kind of a bit of a summary of what they found in 2018, what their sort of future is for 2019. So some of the key things highlighted were mobile device protections. There's still a very low uptake of security on mobile devices, yet the malware and threat vector on mobiles is increasing rapidly. So that's an area of focus for this year for them. Cloud security. So I think everyone knows cloud adoption is growing rapidly. So general security within the cloud, there's still a lot of confusion from many customers around who's responsible for security in the cloud. Is it them? Is it the vendor? Is it the provider? Is it somebody else? And I think that's definitely caused some challenges. So again, Checkpoint have a number of offerings to help with that and sort of explanations why that's important. Checkpoint research. You'll see a logo there that's a new one to Checkpoint. They've kind of branded themselves as a sort of separate division of Checkpoint. It's a key area for them. They do a lot of investigations and discovery and disclosures of vulnerabilities. It's a large team, and they're sort of actively working to try and help make the internet a safer place. And then the last piece is Threat Cloud. So those of you that are using Checkpoint already will know that Threat Cloud is essentially the Checkpoint's sort of back-end system that manages a lot of the protections and systems that come out to the gateways and endpoints and the cloud environment. They're obviously evolving that constantly, changing it to a lot of AI-based detections. And the key thing is that protections must be enforced, not detection. There's no benefit in detecting something but not acting on it. So there are some of the sort of the key messages and focus, and we'll drill into those a bit more. So for those of you that have seen Checkpoint's sort of messaging over the last couple of years, they've come down the approach of looking at a Gen 5 and Gen 6 is the next step of the security model. So what they're basically saying is that back in a few years ago, security was based on a sort of generation 1 security level, and that's a traditional firewall, not really doing very much. We've evolved to the point where technically we have capabilities to do a lot more. So next gen firewalls cover things like IPS, malware prevention, and other services. And the next step on for that, Checkpoint is classing as Gen 6 security, and that's looking at things in a slightly different way. So nano protection, so in other words, integrating the code and technology to do prevention and protection of services within another device, and that's particularly relevant for IoT, or it could be a small sort of gateway that sits between an IoT device and the network, or even on the device itself embedded as a way of protecting you from the sort of threats that exist today. And all of this is going to be powered by AI. That's where Threat Cloud comes in, and that's kind of the future they're seeing that it's going to go down. So in terms of some of the challenges that I'm sure most of you on the call have seen and experienced yourselves, so security challenges and attack vectors are increasing. So some of the stats they're sort of shown from a sort of business perspective is that CIOs and sort of finance managers are very frustrated, I guess, at the fact that they're spending more money on security and not necessarily seeing the return on that investment, because they feel like they're still getting attacks and issues are still occurring. And that's just because things are constantly changing, and hackers are trying to evolve and change the way they work. So it's how do you fix that? Cloud platforms are a big push for a number of companies. And if you've got sort of development teams, their developers are wanting to adopt things and change things quicker than the infrastructure guys can keep up. So that's where automation and sort of APIs and things can help and ensure that things happen quicker. Attacks and productivity is always a balance. So, knowing your user base versus making sure you're prevented is key. So you need to make sure there's a balance between security and usability. And then, of course, these days we've got so many different devices, and some of the stats that they sort of flashed up from the likes of Gartner and other sort of industry leaders around number of devices. They're forecasting 50 devices for a user in 2 years, which sounds crazy, but it's probably true. Some of the other scary stats that came out in 2018, there was just over 16,000 vulnerabilities. As a comparison, 2 years prior to that, the number was just under 7,000. So that's more than doubled in 2 years. So it just shows that hackers are trying to do everything they can to make it everyone's lives worse, and trying to get more gain financially, typically through malware and that kind of thing. So in terms of malware as a whole, obviously that's one of the key areas Check Point's preventing from. So some interesting stats around what's happening, and a lot of this information is available in their security report. We send out a link to that as part of the slides that we send out after this event. So ransomware is definitely on the decline. So if you look at the graph of ransomware over the last few years, at one point it was the number one threat to everyone. Everyone was having problems with it. It's now massively sort of gone down. There's a good chance that's related to the fact that Bitcoin sort of pricing has declined as such. So previously the financial gain from ransomware was huge. The fact that Bitcoin's not worth what it was a year ago is quite possibly related to that change. The big change otherwise is a huge increase in cryptojacking. So we're seeing this is essentially, for those that don't know, where a hacker will use your machine to do crypto mining or sort of insert malware via an email or a web link that's in return going to get them some gain. And the other big steady increase, I guess it's not a massive jump, was mobile-based malware. So we're seeing more and more mobile-based attacks, and that's smishings or SMSs come in that are malicious, dodgy apps, URLs that are attacking the mobile OS. And I think Android is still particularly vulnerable to those. They don't have quite the same model that Apple do, but even Apple now is also seeing the same kind of attacks. In terms of what are Check Point's predictions for this year, so I think that cryptojackers are going to continue. So the graph of that is literally, it was a very, very steep increase in 2018. Generally, cybercrime will grow. Malware will continue to be distributed, but IoT is going to be the key sort of entry point to somebody's network. So these days, in my house alone, I've got numerous IoT devices. They typically aren't updated or managed as well as an enterprise environment would be. So in a corporate environment, a single IoT device will be the way in potentially. So that's an area that Check Point are definitely focusing on from a protection point. Some of the other announcements made around sort of Check Point's product set. So there's a new appliance range, the 6,000 appliance. So ultimately, I think it will replace the 5,000 range that's currently there. And you can see from that slide that the specs are pretty high. They're higher spec than the current 5,000 series appliances by quite a margin. So they have been designed specifically for higher throughput, the ability to do SSO inspection out the box. And they will be the next generation to replace that sort of enterprise model of appliances, and things like 40 gig interfaces will be available as an option. And you can see that the bandwidth figures are pretty impressive. And that links directly into the ability to link into another new offering that is announced actually at one of the CPX events prior to Vienna, but obviously still drilled into it, this one called Maestro. So this is a new offering from Check Point that sort of takes clustering to a different angle. So they called it hyperscaling. So the idea is that previously you'd have a sort of an active passive cluster. You have a defined throughput from that box, and once you've reached that throughput, there's not much you can do about it. Maestro changes that, so you can then just add more and more appliances. So the more appliances you get, you have the ability to do more and more throughput and performance. So essentially you have an orchestrated device, that's what the picture there is, and that device is responsible for the load balancing and sort of grouping of traffic that will then be sent out to a gateway to actually be processed. So it's an interesting, different way of scaling things, something that's very new and different, and that's available to order right now. Next one was SandBlast Mobile. So anyone who's used SandBlast or looked at it recently will know that the V3 product was released, I think it's just before Christmas. So they further evolved that, so we're up to the latest version of version 3.3. Some of the big new changes for that one that's been quite popular from a new feature set will be the ability to do URL filtering on a device, essentially. So previously, that's something that's been quite a challenge for many people to be able to do that kind of thing. It's always been a tricky one. Apple and Android sort of APIs and code doesn't enable you to do such a thing very easily. So they've now managed to get around that. Check Point have worked closely with the vendors to make that possible. So using your native browser on the device or anything, any app that's using gaining internet access will get full protection from URL-based malicious information or categories you want to block, as well as phishing and sort of bots and that kind of thing. So it's full level device protection of all that technology. And it's similar to your Check Point gateways. You can literally go in and block categories as you want to be able to do so. Some of the other ththings like man-in-the-middle attack, that's something that's come out as a beta release. It's got all the original features it had. The Wi-Fi protection, smishing prevention is there, looking at both spam SMSs and malicious SMSs. And the original features around sort of cellular protection around certain things are still there as well. So fully cloud managed for those of you who haven't seen it. An agent or an app that sits on the device, obviously, and that app talks into the cloud service to be sort of managed from there. Next one is, so Check Point made an acquisition recently for a company called Dome9. So that's now been branded from a Check Point perspective as CloudGuard Dome9. This is basically extending Check Point's capability from a cloud sort of security perspective. So previously had the what was VSec and then rebranded as CloudGuard IaaS solution. So this would sit in Azure, AWS, Google Complete. We've also got the SaaS product that was recently announced as well. So that's hooking into things like Office 365 to sort of give you security prevention and monitoring from that perspective. So this is an additional layer that's covering some other areas that Check Point previously couldn't do. So looking at things like compliance and governance. So is the cloud environment aligned to things like PCI DSS or a custom standard that you've defined? So as and when somebody makes a change, you could be alerted as a sort of security admin that something's happened. Full reporting, remediation features, a lot of automation built into it. So as and when a change is made, that can be sort of blocked or stopped based on a policy being violated. And there's a lot around operational management, so being able to draw things like a network map. A lot of people in their cloud environment is kind of grown organically without different people have access to it. Different people spin up VMs and services. So this allows you to map out what you've actually got, what talks to what, that kind of thing, which in a cloud environment is quite tricky to achieve sometimes. And there's also features about things like misconfiguration. So anything that gets misconfigured would be flagged, and again could be auto remediated. A lot of it's agentless, so you don't always need to put an agent on a device for this to happen. They've also got a piece around privileged identity protection. So you can give somebody access to their, say, AWS portal, but based on what exactly they want to do, they may have to escalate their privileges. So a bit like a sort of a two-factor solution. There'd be an app on the device. As they want to go and do this more more senior piece of work or something that's got a bit more risk associated with it, they'd have to escalate their privileges to enable that to happen. In terms of what some of the things, screenshots hopefully just about viewable for those of you on the screen, so we'd say we're sending these slides through afterwards as well. That's the kind of thing you can do. So it's very graphically pretty, all through a web portal. It's obviously a SaaS solution, so there's no infrastructure required on-prem at all. You essentially log onto your portal, link it into your AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud platform. And then it sort of goes off and starts its discovery, and you can configure your policies as you wish. So that's we see that's an area that's going to grow massively for Check Point this year. And it's a sort of a good complementary product, and we're going to see more and more integrations between CloudGuard Dome9 with the other Check Point platforms to sort of interact and speak to each other and centrally report and manage. Next one's two areas, or just some stats around Threat Cloud initially, just thought were quite impressive, really. So 2018, Check Point announced that they managed to block 100 million unknown attacks. So by unknown, that means that they're not sort of signature-based malware or something like that. So that's a huge number. That's basically taking in the feed from their threat emulation cloud services that customers can use. And then the other impressive stat was that they handled 86 billion IOCs. So that's an awful lot of information that's handled and sort of processed by Threat Cloud. So that just shows now from that perspective, from its customers and third parties who take advantage of that service. And what they also announced as part of this kind of offering is a new service coming out shortly called ThreatGuard. So this is a sort of a business monitoring service. So you tell the ThreatGuard portal what your business domain name is and things like key assets, so users, so CEOs, that kind of thing, and it will go off and monitor your domain and your country around looking at intelligence reports, looking at impersonated domains, lookalike domains. If there's any leaked credentials from those accounts, so looking at based on an email address and some credentials being in the dark web, maybe that kind of thing. And this is based looking at traditional internet, but also a large part of this has been able to look into the dark web. This is an example of how a sort of a simple report looks. This is based on our domain, so you can see in the period of just 9 days there, this is the kind of thing it managed to find. Is some lookalike domains that have been registered. MX records, which obviously could be used for then sort of launching a phishing attack or something like that, have been put in. And this is just one example of the kind of things ThreatGuard's going to be able to do. So this to be an interesting product. To say it's early days, it's not available yet. It will be available as an EA sort of early availability release shortly. So if anyone's interested in that, then do let us know. We're happy sort of get you hooked up with the right people. So you can see this in a bit more detail. So, and obviously long term, this will feed into the Check Point products again, but this is again a SaaS service that's offered directly by Check Point on their, as a cloud service. So it's very simple to set up and manage. Next one, some bits around automation. So automation is key for a lot of companies these days. They're trying to save time and money and staff sort of wasting their time on things that are sort of menial tasks. So this is more around the deployment side of things. So anyone that's had to deploy Check Point gateways knows that there's a bit of setup has to be done. You've got to load some software and images. So these are 3 new areas, and some of these aren't brand new, but they've just kind of retouched on them. Some people weren't aware of them, so it's worth highlighting. So first one is called Blink. So Blink is a method of very quickly setting up an appliance using a USB stick. So you can pre-script things like DNS servers and host names even as you wish. But the idea is it's a quick way of just booting an appliance with some pre-configured, predefined settings. And then after that box is booted, it will just automatically be ready to go. Second one is called Zero Touch. So this is a free service, actually. We did check that out recently just to make sure, but essentially the idea of this one is it's particularly suited for anyone that's got global deployments of some of the smaller appliances, but it does work on the bigger ones too. You register the MAC address of the device in Check Point Zero Touch Cloud Portal. You define in there what your standard settings should be. So again, things like DNS services. You can define even things like the interfaces and anything in the first time wizard, essentially. And what happens is as the device gets internet connectivity, so the idea of you have a DHCP device that's dishing out an IP address for the management port just to connect to the internet initially, it will go off to that Zero Touch website, download all its settings, and then be ready to go. So there's absolutely no interaction needed at all. So it's a quick way of getting devices set up, and if you've got remote offices that don't have IT teams, this could be a good way of getting you being able to manage that kind of process should a device need upgrading or replacement or something like that. And then the last one is the central deployment tool. So again, this tool's been out for a little while, but one of the big changes it's going to change from currently it's a CLI-based solution. Not everyone likes CLIs. It's going to change into a GUI-based solution, and that's going to be part of R80.30, which has just gone into the early availability phase. So that's available as a beta download now. So that's in the GUI. And this tool is basically designed to do things like deployment of jumbo hotfixes, custom hotfixes if you get something from TAC that needs sort of deploying specifically to your environment. It can do things like system backups centrally and then drag them back in. So sort of a tool for your gateways essentially. So that's something that's kind of enhancing all the time and very useful for anyone that's got a number of devices in their estate. Next one is one of the bigger ones. So they've announced Infinity 2.0. So Infinity 1, version 1 is what we're on now. So Infinity is Check Point's security architecture around centrally managing, monitoring and reporting on an estate. So today it's pretty powerful as it is. So it can manage and monitor mobile, cloud, on-premise environments. And what this is going to do is further expand that throughout 2019, so it's not available right now. It's going to be sort of later in this year and then even more next year. Focus initially on public cloud and IoT will be the first two use cases. So that's essentially integrating some of the CloudGuard Dome 9 features into the standard checkpoint management platform, and then IoT as well. So the platform is going to be built and scaled to manage millions of assets, not just tens. So with IoT, things change quite dramatically because you go from having an on-premise gateway at your office to having potentially hundreds of IoT devices. So this will be a cloud-based service potentially as an option. So you can have on-prem or cloud. It's going to be open source driven, so there's going to be a lot of APIs and the ability for you to customize and tweak how the product works. So Check Point will publish a lot of information into GitHub and open source community forums, that kind of thing. And it kind of leads the way for what we spoke about at the beginning of the presentation around having nano agents, so software within the device embedded or a gateway that leads to the checkpoint solution for protection point of view. This is how all these are going to be managed. So there are also going to be things like web app and API level protection. So it's kind of the future, trying to scale out from the traditional model of an on-premise firewall in your data center that we know in the future is just not going to be the way most companies operate. This is the start of enabling that to happen. So more will come out on that this year. It's early days, but they showed some sort of initial mock-ups of it, and it looks very clever. So lastly, just to focus on some of the roadmap items that they kind of sort of went through. If anyone's ever been to a checkpoint session on roadmaps, one of their senior vice presidents stands there and sends out an awful lot of information in a very short space of time. So these are kind of our highlights that we picked out that we thought were important for people to realise. So first one is around SaaS services. So we're seeing most customers want things as a SaaS service now. They don't want to have things on-prem. The days of that are definitely reducing rapidly. So Check Point are going to essentially make just about everything they do a SaaS service. So that's something that we're going to see hopefully come out during this year. So right from security management, logs as a service, endpoint as a service, network security. So that's basically, in fact, we've got a bit about that further down. And CloudGuard is already a SaaS service. So hosted by Check Point, managed by Check Point, they're responsible for patching and uptime of the service and everything. You will just use it as a web-based service. So that's a big push for this year is for that to come through. Mobile management. So this is another new area. So today, obviously, those of you using the Check Point interface will know you have Smart Console. So this is essentially a mobile version of that. So obviously you're not going to manage everything you can do from Smart Console from this, but the idea is you'll be able to get some visibility of what's going on. So certain things will be able to be managed, certainly full visibility, logs, status, that kind of thing is something up, down, and you'll be able to do certain functions from there as well. So that would be across iOS and Android. They're going to start it off with their small business range, so the sort of 700, 900 series gateways that are managed in their existing cloud platform, and then that will move to enterprise after that. Next one's quite an interesting one, CloudGuard VNF it's called. So this is essentially anyone that's used the Check Point 1400 series or the 700 appliance as well. That's called Gaia Embedded. So that's it's essentially sort of most of the features you get in the larger Check Point appliances running Gaia. These will basically sit on a sort of a chip rather than being like this sort of an installation-based hard drive. So what they've basically done is take that operating system that runs quite efficiently on a 1400. They have less than a gig around those devices, and they've given it the ability to embed that into a third-party solution. And one of the starting points for that is SD-WAN. So anyone that's looking at SD-WAN, which a lot of people are these days, is a sort of cost-saving method from MPLS. You'll be able to take solutions from the likes of Cisco Viptela, Silver Peak, VMware VeloCloud, and basically embed a Checkpoint OS onto an existing appliance from that vendor. So still keep the vendor's product from an SD-WAN perspective, and an insertion layer basically means that before it's sort of processed and sent out from the LAN to the WAN interface, Checkpoint will do its normal level of inspection and protection, and it's all sat on another solution's appliance. So again, that's kind of the start of the ability to put Checkpoint onto non-Checkpoint appliances in a traditional way. SD-WAN's the starting point. There will be other areas as well. So they showed a demo of Checkpoint running on an Intel NUC, which is one of the, if anyone's seen them, the small Intel appliance that can run various software appliances. So it could even go into like a VM and all sorts of things in the future. So that's the starter. That's available now for some of the SD-WAN vendors. And that leads on to the next one around generally Checkpoint being able to integrate with SD-WAN. It's a big focus area for a lot of customers, so that's a key one I think people are going to appreciate. Next one is called NSAS, so Network Security as a Service. So Checkpoint had a product that's been out for a little while called Capsule Cloud. It enables laptops, desktops to talk back to Checkpoint's cloud-based environment as a security gateway. So essentially taking your existing on-premise security solutions, extending it to cloud, and then using it for roaming laptops. What this solution does is basically extend this to a branch office. So you could have, if you've got a corporate data center, you've invested in some big beefy Checkpoint firewalls for there, that makes sense. If you've got a number of smaller offices that maybe have a handful of users, maybe what this solution would be that via your existing router that's sat on that site, so any vendor, Cisco, Draytech, even home user stuff, it doesn't matter. That device essentially will create a tunnel through to Checkpoint's cloud service. So again, hosted by Checkpoint, nothing to do with you guys. And that basically tunnels all the traffic to Checkpoint, and you get exactly the same level of protection you've got on your on-premise environment, but as a cloud-hosted service. The users sat in those branch offices will receive anti-bot, antivirus, threat emulation, URL filtering, and that's all integrated and managed centrally through your management server. So they just see it as a cloud-based gateway, and you can push out your policies to that and receive the logs and reports as normal. So that's currently in early availability. So Checkpoint are open for registrations if everyone wants to try that out as a beta release, and it will be coming soon. And then final slide, endpoint roadmap. So anyone that's used Checkpoint's endpoint solutions, they have one called SandBlast Agent. So that's basically taking the same protection you see on your gateways to your endpoints. So the ability to do things like threat emulation, download it from the internet. There's browser extensions that sit into Chrome and things to say, is this site deemed phishing or malicious or something like that? And essentially they've taken that product that's been out for Windows for some time now and ported it to the Mac. So Mac is an area that, again, a lot of companies are seeing growth in. Users like the idea of it. So that those same features that are available for Windows today will move across to the Mac. Next one is VDI support. So it's something that Checkpoint used to do many years ago. They stopped doing it, and it's now coming back. So anyone in a VDI environment, that could be Microsoft, via RDP and Hyper-V, that kind of thing, or VMware View, those kind of things, Citrix. You're going to be able to put a SandBlast or Checkpoint agent onto those VDI-based solutions and get the same level of protection. It's obviously a very different concept because it's one server with lots of users. So the solution just needs to be built up and supported for that. So. And then the last one is support for Chromebooks. So Chromebooks have become more and more popular, particularly for sort of kids and sort of in education. So Checkpoint have actually released a dedicated product called SandBlast for Education. So it essentially takes the SandBlast technology that you can use in a Windows environment and extends that out to a Chromebook device. So cloud managed, cloud hosted, and the devices check in to receive their policy. So that was it on endpoint. From a cloud perspective, also we've mentioned the CloudGuard Dome 9. There's also some early information about an Azure Firewall as a Service. So that's essentially an evolution of the existing CloudGuard IaaS solution via sort of API-driven calls. So that's early days for that one. More details will come out on that one soon. And then the last couple of bits are around some enhancements to the sort of management side of things. So first one's called Smart Tasks. So this is a new feature that will be an addition as part of your management environment. So an example would be you push somebody within the team pushes a policy to the gateways. This can automatically trigger something occurring after that taking place. So that could be an API call to ServiceNow to update a ticket to say, this ticket that's been opened for a change has now been actioned, and that will get automatically inserted into the ticket. It could also be an email to a manager to say, policy's just been installed, is this expected, that kind of thing. And it can also be used as a pre-installation of a policy, but essentially anything that's trigger-based. So once an action is performed, a trigger will occur and something will happen. So that's something that's expected a bit later on in 2019. It's sort of in the development phases right now, but kind of thing that people have asked for in the past, especially with integration with things like ServiceNow. Then the last piece is a feature called Smart Console Extensions. So this is actually available now as part of RAC.20, which obviously has recently been released. So essentially this is linking in your Smart Console with something else from another product as an API-driven sort of call. So an example they gave again is ServiceNow. So through the GUI, you can essentially see a tab that says this particular rule is associated with ServiceNow ticket number 3000 or whatever. So everything is seen in a single place within Smart Console, but it references external third-party integration. So ServiceNow is just one example. There's lots of other things that could also be used with that. So that's available right now. And again, there's more details of that on Checkpoint's knowledge base. So that was our kind of quick highlight session of what was discovered and sort of spoken about at CPX. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we will send through the slides and the recording after the event, and there are some links into things to download. And if there's any other questions or if anyone wants to sort of drill down into a bit deeper, feel free to reach out to your account manager. I'm more than happy to have a chat to discuss it in more detail. But otherwise, thanks everyone for joining. We'll give everyone a minute or two to see if there's any questions, and then we'll leave you to your day. Thanks very much. Okay, looks like